Welcome to the Tailoring Talk Show with me, your host, Roberto Revilla. I'm a bespoke tailor, menswear designer, and owner of Roberto Revilla London Suit Shirt and Shoemakers. It's the podcast where you drop in for the threads, but often leave with something unexpected. You join me as I meet self-starters and creators to learn about their journeys, the highs and lows, and lessons they've learned along the way. Please support the show by subscribing. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it helps so much if you take a few seconds to rate and review the show. My guest today has over 23 years experience as a coach and speaker, host of the Landscaping Your Life podcast and author of the book Can't See the Wood for the Trees. She helps people to get back on track when they're stuck and don't know what to do. Her unique, quirky perspective uses nature as a metaphor for our lives, allowing her to help people in an unconventional way that they may not be used to, but which always gets results. Here to help us become clearer, more focused, and take action, Tailoring Talkers, please welcome Alison Smith to the show. Alison, how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant. And you're still with me through all my cat calamities and so on, because just as Alison and I got on the call, Frankie decided, regular listeners know who he is, decided to basically gate crash everything. But Alison, welcome. You are in Scotland.
I am indeed in Fife, yes, looking out across the Firth of Forth to Edinburgh.
Beautiful. I miss it. And because we have a lot of Americans across the pond, a lot of listeners across the pond who obviously are Americans. Just explain how you ended up in Scotland, because they'll be confused with your accent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I've just always thought that I've moved north, really, sort of never been as far south in England as you. Was born in the Midlands, went to university slightly further north in Nottingham and Derbyshire, and then spent some time in Yorkshire, picked up the Yorkshire accent, so a lot of my guttural use, so I hug people. It's very Yorkshire. I can't hear it, but then when people repeat it back to me, and then I got a job. Well, I'd always wanted to live near the sea. And I worked for a bank at the time. And when they merged, they went, oh, well, you could go to Edinburgh. And I suddenly realised that Edinburgh was near the sea. So it's like, oh, right. So I moved up here, not really knowing anybody, but I just knew I wanted to live by the sea.
You're, I don't think you've got any trace of your Midlands accent whatsoever.
I say Nottingham as you would Nottingham, I think. And the odd person bumps into me and puts me there. So I think there might be the odd word, but I think I've picked up to say I've been in Scotland longer than I was in Yorkshire, but I've definitely got a northern accent. And I mean the odd Scottish word kicks in.
Yeah, my wife, when she first came to the UK from Spain, she landed in Glasgow, so she continued education at Glasgow University, did her master's there, learned English there.
Wow.
So when I first met her, she had this really funny, cute sort of Spanish, Scottish sort of lilt, and she would say things like hoose. Yeah, and a couple of other words that I can't remember. And she used to pronounce sugar really funny as well.
I don't know that one.
And I as us arrogant English people do, we correct everybody all the time. And she said, well, I don't know what you're going on about. That's just how I learned English when I was up there north of the border. But I've spent a lot of time in Scotland. I've worked up there. I absolutely love it. And can't wait to get back up there at some point soon. So, can't see the wood through the trees. I think a lot of people are going through that at the moment. I definitely have been. Your podcast is a godsend, a breath of fresh air.
Thank you.
Lots of aha moments when listening to you, Alison. And you can tell that a lot of the help advice that you give today is born out of a life of experience. You've obviously learned a lot of lessons yourself, and you thankfully are imparting a lot of those lessons to us. But just tell me, or give for the listeners, give us a bit of background about how you kind of got to where you are today in your position as coach, public speaker, etc.?
Um, Left university. University said go into purchasing, and I went into purchasing. So I was a buyer for large organizations and did that, and I loved it. It was a mix, used my analytical skills and my people skills, so that was great. And then I suppose about mid-90s was trying to explain to business managers in the organization that they should be looking after their suppliers, and they got bored and they went, yeah, and go away. And suddenly thought, well, if we use gardening as a metaphor, and sort of, because people understand gardening, certainly here in the UK, because most people have either got gardens, visited gardens, have got house plants at least, and therefore they know that gardens need, plants need watering, feeding, pruning, mowing. And then as soon as you say to these managers, well, you accept that a garden needs all of those things to have a flourishing plants in it, that's what our suppliers need. And suddenly they went, oh, yeah. That's why we've got suppliers that are struggling, because we've plonked them in the corner and we haven't even put, their roots in the soil. We're not watering them, etc. And so I suppose my love of metaphor started then. Then I went on a neuro-linguistic programming course and like, oh my God, I suddenly realized why, I don't know, more about me, I suppose. And what then happened was I was learning things at the weekend, and then I was able to come back and became, I suppose, our department's coach. So I was allowed to teach everything or share everything I was learning. And so if somebody was stuck or having a bad day, I'd be the person they'd come to. And in and amongst all that, I suppose I started to realize, oh, that's why the metaphor idea worked before, because quite often when people are stuck, we get caught up in the story, and like we give all the evidence about why we are stuck and why that person can't change. And we just get so, every time we talk to somebody, it's as if we're reinforcing our stuckness. And what I learned, in the early, noughties, I suppose, was, oh, but metaphor's great for that, because you send logical thinking on a coffee break, and then we can look at it metaphorically. And so because I'd been using gardening as a metaphor for supplier management, I just expanded it and went, oh, nature's landscapes for life. And therefore, as you say, I've spent the last 23 years just applying it with people, going out into nature, walking around woods with, suited business leaders. And the reason that that the ahas happen in the podcast is when I did the first series of podcast episodes I did, it was a bit too academic, because I was sitting in my office and reeling off what had happened previously, and it worked. But what I just enjoy is going out today and going, what do I notice today in nature? And the reason I get excited is that I'm seeing it as I'm sharing with you what I'm seeing, and it's quite often new. It's like, oh, I've never thought of it like that. And so, that enthusiasm for the subject comes over in the podcast, I think.
Yeah. I use nature analogies a lot. I'm a very visual person. I'm sure that's probably an aspect of your personality that you discovered when you did the NLP course. And I am very visual. I mean, I guess it's one reason I do what I do. I talk in metaphors a lot. Previous episodes, listeners will know, and they'll be rolling their eyes. But, I'll say to guests, it's like Disney up in my brain, because I think of everything in terms of animation and so on. And I use nature analogies all the time or metaphors rather. But in my work with clients, because a lot of time you have to give them confidence about the kind of colors and things that you're putting together for them. And the world has gone a little bit less formal, so people are dressing in a more mixed fashion, so smart casual or business casual, or I mean, to be honest, frankly, down in London, kind of even below that. And so people are kind of breaking out of the usual wearing a black charcoal or dark navy suit with a white or blue shirt. Suddenly they're faced with this world of color and they don't know what to do. They don't have the confidence that breaking out of that color set is going to work for them, but they want to express their personality somehow. And what I say to people, when they're sort of sat there with swatches looking at greens and browns and reds and burgundies and oranges and things, I say to them, let's just take a look out the window for a second. Or if we're in the basement of my workroom, we can't really do that. But I say to them, if you just close your eyes for a second, just imagine that you're on the heath or you're by the beach and just think about the colours of nature. Now, what are the most dominant colours that we see when we look outside? Well, blue because of the sky and green because of trees and plants and so on. You never ever look at a group of flowers together and you might have all different types of flowers, reds and, yellows and oranges and purples and so on. You never ever think, whatever your belief system is, God kind of got that color combination a bit wrong. You never ever, but you don't, do you? You
Yeah,
never think
no.
that. You never
Yeah,
take
yeah.
a walk through a meadow or through a heath or
I
something
love
and
it.
think, God, everything's a bit, nothing really works here. What the hell was nature thinking? Everything does just work in harmony.
Yeah, yeah.
So, as and I say to clients, so if it works and you can see suddenly the light bulb going on, and I say to them, so if it works in nature, it will work with whatever clothing combinations that you're putting together as well. You just need to have the confidence to be able to do that. And now that I've told you what I've just told you, you should have the confidence. And that really works with them. When I'm having business conversations or I'm talking to people who are in a position to help me with personal development or business development coaching and so on, and they're trying to get an idea of where I'm at, the analogy that I've been using quite a lot for the last year or so, because our business is at this kind of tipping point and there's a lot going on. I say to them, so I would say to you, Alison, I feel like I'm in the eye of a tornado and it's picked everything up that's going on in my life and I can see it all swirling around me, but I can't reach out and grab any one single thing to hold it down and focus on it. I really, really do feel like I'm in the eye of the storm constantly. And every time I think I'm getting some clarity and I'm able to sort of pull myself away from it, the tornado just catches me up and starts whipping me around, and I end up in the eye of it again. And that is a very, very visceral
Yeah.
way of describing a situation, but it means that people get it straight away. And that's why I love using imagery like that when I'm talking to people and I'm trying to explain things. And because it has so much impact and it kind of saves time as well, but it also stays with people.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, and I would say there's a number of different directions you could go to find the solution, so you stop doing that. Because that metaphor, that's where I can't see the wood for the trees came from. In terms of, I suddenly realised that when we're stuck, we do use language like you've just used, but also we can mine that metaphor for solutions. Now, the interesting thing is that I've got two questions. Is it really a tornado, or is it that you're just going around in circles? Because there's two different solutions, depending on whether you're really going around in circles or whether it's a tornado.
Oh, that's a really, really interesting question.
You see, I don't even need to know anything about the details. I'll just stick with the you're not going to have to share anything else about the situation, but you do need to make a decision. Well, you don't have to. The chances are, if it's circling, we deal with the circling first. The tornado is really quite interesting, because if you were really in a tornado, what would you be doing? You wouldn't be trying to reach out and grab anything, would you?
Don't know. I just I've
That would
never
be
actually
very
been in
unhealthy. But that
yeah,
would
it
be
would.
very unhealthy. You'd be actually going and finding. I went to Scotland's secret bunker, which was, from the war, basically, this week with the kids next door. And so that was all about, hankering down, and hiding from the world, really. So it is interesting that when it gets very tornado-like, is trying to do anything the right thing.
Yeah.
And I
And I
would
guess you're
suggest
right. It's
perhaps
probably going
not.
round in circles is probably because then now in my mind, I'm sort of seeing for some reason on a tricycle. I don't know why, but now
Oh,
I'm on a
wow.
tricycle and I'm whizzing around.
Oh, okay, cool.
Trying,
Well, I think
trying,
sorry,
and I
carry on.
keep seeing the same things over and over again. So I'm actually kind of not really getting.
Okay, so that's the circling.
Yeah,
So if it's circling you're at, and anybody listening can put us on hold temporarily while they get a pen and paper, because if they're thinking that they might be going round in circles, then hearing us talk it is not anywhere near as effective as trying it out for themselves. Because
absolutely.
otherwise they'll just go, those two are nuts.
Yeah.
What do they mean that worked? Whereas if they try it for themselves. So the idea, so have you got a pen and paper to hand, you see, between you and the cat? There was always a cat disappeared.
Oh God, yeah. No, the cat. Do you know what? As soon as I said, right, we're settled down, let's get going, he buggered off.
Yeah.
After all that backwards and forwards, knocking the microphone,
Yeah.
walking all over your notes,
Cool. Yeah, cool.
Anyway, yes, I have.
So what I need you and any listeners to do is to start drawing the circle that represents the circling you're going round in.
Okay.
So just draw it, and from now on, I want you to just keep pen or whatever your instrument you're using, but just keep that circling going, and notice how quickly you're going, the direction of travel you're going, and then what I want you to do is to change direction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for some people, just doing that may have already shifted something, but because it's really difficult when I'm doing it where I can't see the person because I'm having to cover all bases. However,
Yes.
slower. Try going slower.
Mm-hmm.
Notice what happens when you go slower or quicker. And the
Oh,
thing is if there's anything that I say where it makes it worse, then go back to how it was before. What just happened?
I like slower.
You like slower, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what happened when you started going slower? Now, you change direction. Does slower help if you go in the opposite direction? What slower do?
Yeah, definitely. Because when you asked me, so when you asked me to start drawing, I
Yeah.
probably went in the direction that I felt I was going.
All right, lovely. Yeah.
Which is kind of, I feel like I'm going clockwise really fast all the time.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And then when you told me to reverse, I immediately slowed down because all of a sudden going anti-clockwise is quite alien to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when you told me to speed up again, it's the circle's starting to get really messy.
All right, yeah.
But so slowing down, the lines are getting cleaner and bolder as well.
And do you need to turn it back to clockwise, or is it better anti-clockwise?
No, actually, I'm feeling calmer going anti-clockwise.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Quite nice.
And all we're trying to do, I mean, that's the thing. It's life wasn't really a tornado. You weren't in jeopardy. You hadn't got all of your possessions going round and round your head, but that's how your brain was representing the situation. And if you think about it, of course you would be in overwhelm and not knowing what to do, because if we were really in a tornado, we'd have, I imagine, I've never been in one, but I can imagine that we'd be, worried, at least, anxious, overwhelmed, So I always say that quite often our metaphors give the clue to what's closed the door to our brain, to the solution. It's like we know what to do instinctively, but what's happened is we've got into overwhelm. Whatever's happening in our life has got us there. And therefore, we can't see the solution. And we've given the clue. We've said it feels like a tornado. So it's like, okay, so we'll do this circling. So it could be that now you're going slower and in anti-clockwise, the other direction, that the door is open in your head to release the overwhelm and for you to go, oh, that's what I'm missing.
Possibly. Yeah, going slower is it's giving more time,
Yeah,
and when you get more time, you get more space. And when you get more space, you get more
yeah.
just room
Cool.
to
All
kind
right.
of breathe,
Lovely. Yeah.
think.
So, just for
Yeah.
the listeners who may not have had the aha yet, other solutions for them might be quicker, faster, change direction, try and break free of the circling and see what happens. It could be sometimes I've had it where going in triangles or going around in squares, or rectangles, or one person, when I had this conversation with them, turned around and said, "Oh, I'm I'm currently going round the moon, and I need
Oh,
to, and it's the gravity. I need to speed up so that the gravity, I don't know the science of it, but the gravity will slingshot me back to Earth again." And so they drew, so they're circling, they drew the moon in the middle of their circle, and they drew the Earth, and they drew themselves coming back to Earth, and then they were able to come up with an action plan. Other people have just turned round, literally just turned round and stopped and went, "Oh, that stopped the circling. I now know what to do." Now, you can do it by pen, you can do it by walking around in nature. So, I've had, one person, when they were doing it in nature, I was saying, right, going around a circle. Well, okay, so break free. Which direction do you want to go? Oh, I know which direction I want to go. I want to go in that direction. Go in that direction. So they walk down the path. And then they got so far, and it was a bit like they were on an elastic band, that they wanted to come back to the circling. But
yeah.
what we were able to do is understand, oh, but it's because I'm afraid of losing something. I'm afraid of missing out. I'm afraid that, oh, the other direction might be more interesting than the direction I've told you I want to go. But the thing was, every time I said to them, which direction do you want to go? I want to go in that one. Well, there's no doubt about the direction you want to go. So, no, just go that way. So, yeah, so draw it. There is a PDF on my website, actually, about giving instructions for the circling, but it is what I've just said, really. Play around with it. It could be, you might have found it better to change color. So if you're very into color, it could be that you were imagining going around in, I don't know, dark circles and adding a whole load of rainbow circles. What would that do if you're imagining having a rainbow of circle going back slowly? So it's just about changing the representation in your head such that you get exactly what you got, which was
Yeah.
that, oh, this feels different. Because that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for oh, that feels different. And then it's, okay, let's now get logic back in. Let's ask logic what we can now do differently. What is the solution, or the option, or the opportunity that was hidden from view previously?
Yeah. I just realized something as well, that one thing I do to release or to get away from things is I cycle. And I often cycle down at Regent's Park, which is basically a circle, 4.6 kilometers in diameter. And I always cycle anti-clockwise,
Oh,
yeah, rather than clockwise. Um, Runners tend to go clockwise around it. I don't know if that's just because they don't like having the cyclist to their back, but anyway, the fact that that is my release, and I tend to go round in that direction. I don't like going around the other direction,
gorgeous.
and I think it's because I feel like I'm going in that clockwise direction super fast all the time, and going around the
Lovely.
other way is me kind of
Yeah.
slowing everything down and so on.
So
Wait, you
next
got
time you're feeling stuck, yes, I'm certainly not saying don't go for a cycle ride, but next time you're stuck where you're going, oh, I need a solution immediately, is just try drawing your circling in and just draw a circle anti-clockwise, because that might just be the sort of the quick way to get your brain back on track.
yeah,
How cool would that
absolutely.
be?
When you have someone like me come to you that oh God, it's Roberto, here we go. Um, and this nutcase basically says to you, Alison, I feel like, but then I just paint a very vivid picture for you of how, so I don't actually tell you what it is. I'll just be painting a landscape or whatever, or a weather system in this case. Um, when you have someone that comes to you that maybe isn't a visual person, so that maybe they're a little bit more analytical and so on, and they don't think in that way naturally, So they might tell you specifically, this is the problem that I've got. How do you, does that ever happen? Or
Yeah,
how do you,
people
how,
want to tell me it,
yeah,
but I can be quite rude.
I get that. No, not because you've been rude in any way, shape,
No,
or
no, no.
form.
But I can say that's not what we're doing. So
Yeah,
and quite often, if that's the case, I've never had anybody that can't do it. But what we will do is and I'm now looking out my window. We'll go out
yeah,
of the window. We'll go out the window. We'll go out into nature,
yeah,
and I'll just ask them to notice things. Somebody the other week, in fact, they were in LA. I was here in Scotland. They're walking around in nature. I don't have to be because they are. And they got a huge insight after about an hour of walking. And I thought afterwards, oh, I wonder whether, because it was actually a nice little technique. And I thought, oh, I could use that, earlier in the process. But I thought afterwards, sometimes it's just the walk you need to
mm,
go on to sort
yeah,
of get there. So yes, so even if somebody's very logical, then it's, yeah, let's go for a walk. Let's notice what we notice. And invariably there'll be something, whether it's the tide or whether the thing that's coming to mind was somebody, we'd walked to the top of the hill behind the house and we'd come down and they said, oh, but it's not taking, what's it? It's still too long. It's like I'm being impatient about it.
yeah,
And I was able to say, well, and it was sort of midsummer, and I was able to say, well, look at all these, the leaves here. How long do you think these leaves have been here? I said, because actually progress in nature is quite incremental. And therefore, if you'd have come every day for the last 8 weeks, 3 months, you might not have noticed from day to day the changes. But if I gave you a picture of what it looked like 3 months ago and what it looks like now, we could see the sky, whereas now we can't because of the leaves, etc. So there's always something about the patterns in nature. Yeah. I mean, even if it's things like somebody wanting to turn a corner. And I mean, in fact, I remember recently somebody who's very, very logical, software engineer, very logical. And we were in Edinburgh
yeah,
Botanical Gardens. But his face when we turned the corner, because the corner you have to turn has to be one you can't see round.
yeah,
And every time I do it with somebody, I always think, "Oh, is this the time that it's going to turn into a dead end or something?" But it never does, and it's always, because when you turn a corner, you see something new because it's a completely different landscape than what you were looking at before that you turned the corner.
yeah,
And even the most logical there's a shift.
yeah.
But
It's,
they do. But the hardest thing, and I mean, I do train coaches in it, and the hardest thing is that people want to stick with the metaphors. I mean, with the real life situation. So they'll start telling me about the situation, and then that is when I have to be rude by saying, but that's not the process.
yeah,
The process isn't, if you could solve it with the data and information you've got currently, you'd have done it by now.
yeah,
Because I deal with people who are stuck. It's like that's what I'm good at. I'm good at getting people out of a hole.
yeah,
But sometimes people need yanking a bit, which is,
yeah, yeah,
no, don't talk more, because all you're doing is digging yourself further into the hole you're in.
yeah. It's that
Let's
very,
get out of it.
it's that very physical association by, taking that action. So in this case, we've been talking about taking a walk, which I have to do every single day because two dogs. Um, but especially on days where I'm just feeling like I'm stuck in the mud or I'm stuck in a forest that I can't get out of. So I make sure I just leave my phone behind and walk. And what a lot of us do. I remember one of my bosses years and years ago. I was walking with him and we were just in central London, and he said to me, he said, Have you noticed that people, because they've got so much on their minds and they've got so much going on, everybody walks and they're looking down. They just look down at the pavement. I mean, this was in the days when you couldn't really do much on a smartphone. Well, they weren't smartphones. They were just, I mean, you remember.
I do.
Whereas, nowadays everybody's staring at them. But back then you couldn't really do much on a phone. So people still had them in their pockets if they had a phone, and they were looking down at the pavement. He said, you see them, everybody's scurrying along and they're just looking down, trapped in their own thoughts. He said, it makes such a difference when you look up. He said, just look up, and then you start to see everything that you're missing by focusing down.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I always try to remember to do that when I'm feeling hemmed in and I'm feeling really stuck in the mud. I always try to remember to just look up. And the
Nice.
physical act of doing that, I guess, a bit like turning that corner, and the things that you suddenly see that you hadn't noticed before suddenly open up, and it opens things up in your mind. So yeah, so I can see how that works.
Which is why, if you know, I've got a podcast episode where I'm treading water in the sea here in Scotland, and so I'm not suggesting that you have to go and embody every uphill struggle or whatever, but if you can go out into the landscape and replicate how you're feeling, you will absolutely get insight.
Yeah.
I don't suppose I can tell you a lot about the research, but Caroline, oh God, what was it? Williams wrote a book, Move, the New Science of Body Over Mind. And in that book, she talks a lot about why, moving forward in a landscape would actually facilitate shifting mindset. So yeah, there is at least science behind it. I mean, in addition to the fact that, being out in nature is good for us. So we're out in nature, we're moving our bodies, and also we're allowing nature to provide us with insight and new suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you gonna, do you think you'll write another book again in future? Or is your
Yeah,
focus more on helping people through coaching and the podcast?
no, I love writing.
Ah.
I've written quite a lot of poems,
Yeah.
and realizing that they resonate as well. So, and a lot of those they're all written out in nature. A lot of them relate to nature, but they are also really quite relatable to self-development. So I suspect it will be a nature and poetry book.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but I can't think that it will just be poetry. It's more likely to be, here's the poem. For instance, there's one called Paths and Destinations. And so, I mean, and I've done workshops using that poem. And it's got, I don't know, about 10 stanzas. And each stanza in its own right could be insight for somebody. So it's like, okay, some paths are dead ends. So we need to turn round. Other paths are just to go to a higher vantage point. And I wrote the poem thinking it was about how to get back on track. It's like, oh yes, all the paths to find a destination. We must know where the destination is. And all of these paths were, no, the path's the destination in its own right. It was really quite interesting that, well, I suppose that's what poetry is, isn't it? I get surprised by the poetry. I sit down thinking I'm going to write one thing and something completely different emerges. So I suspect it'll be around that.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So obviously anyone listening, go to wherever you get your podcasts and search for Landscaping Your Life. It will come up immediately with Alison Smith, and just subscribe. And it's not really episodic, is it, Alison? People can
No.
kind of just scroll down
Yeah.
and sort of look at episode titles and sort of say, I'm kind of actually feel like I'm struggling with that sort of thing at the moment, and then sort of dip in. They don't need to go in order, do they?
No. What I now in the episode notes, there is a link to an index. So at all times, people can then go, oh, okay, here's the index. I mean, you could do it through the podcast, but the index gives a bit more information about it. But so yeah, and I'm trying with the episode titles to resonate with how people might be feeling. So if it feels like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, or they're treading water, or it's uphill struggle, or don't know what to do, or lost, so that then what I'm doing is, it's only me, so it's not me interviewing anybody. It's me out in nature, taking that saying and seeing what nature has to share. And then this last series, I've added a poem in, and I've sort of played around with it. But what's working best is we go out into nature, and then I end with the poem, and then people can take from the poem what they will. But yeah.
So I've got the Treading Water episode queued up to listen to next later.
Well, somebody left me a comment about it because they just felt like it was they just, what was it? She said, I just felt I was there with you. Because to be fair, I mean, the water, I think, I'm sure I didn't do it in the summer. So I think I'll have done it in the winter. So the water here will have been about 6 or 7 degrees.
Yeah.
And I'm there with a selfie stick with my phone, at the other end, trying to keep that out of the water and, tread water. And so, yeah, you get the down as I'm getting cold.
Where were you? Were you in the?
Yeah, I
were
was
you
in
in
the
the
third or
fourth?
fourth. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But
In wind.
well, I think I can't. I mean, I'd have to look at my phone to see when I actually did that recording. But I mean, to be fair, the water it's 12 degrees about now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about, I don't know, what is it? I don't know what it is
in Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Double it and add 30, right?
Oh, I don't know.
So about 54.
Okay. Oh, well, I was going to say, okay. So yeah. So it gets down to about 43 or something.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, treading water. If you feel like you're treading water, then yeah, have a listen to that one. But yeah, there's I would certainly suggest having a look at the episode titles and just going, oh yeah, that is what resonates with how I'm feeling, because I absolutely know that my work, if you're listening and you haven't thought of a situation to apply it to, it's just a bit too weird because people go, I don't understand. Whereas as soon as you're out, because the other thing would be is if it's about a rock and a hard place, then go and find a rock and a hard place and follow me in keeping safe at all times, obviously. I do feel the need to say that at times during that one. I think there was one where I was writing my book, actually, Can't See the Wood for the Trees, at the top of a cliff. And what I learned was if I faced the cliff edge, I was happy, but it was sunny. And I thought, I'll turn around and I'll just sit with my back to the cliff edge. Oh my God, I've never been so scared. So it was, yes, there was a whole load of insight. So anyway, go out safely into nature, listen to the podcast while you're in nature, and it'll just give you some hints. And as you say, you can get in stuff from what I'm saying, but you also may see something in your own landscape where it's, oh my God. Somebody the other week, we'd gone up, they were in LA, but they were in the, I don't know, mountains out of LA, and they're going up the hill, and there was something that was really annoying them on the way up, and on the way down, the sun was shining on it, and they went, oh my God, even the sun shines on what I was finding annoying earlier. And so yeah, I think that's what I enjoy, that the tide comes in and covers something up, or you see things from a different direction when you're coming back. And yeah.
Brilliant. Alison, people can also connect with you on LinkedIn. So I'm going to make sure I have all of your
Lovely.
links for LinkedIn, your website, and the podcasts in the show notes, and also put a link to some places where people can get a hold of your book. I'm guessing it's all the usual places.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And I always ask everybody this: have you had fun today?
Oh, I've loved it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Quirky, yes. Unique.
Yeah.
Definitely unique. But above all else, Alison, you have been an absolute delight. Thank you so much. I feel very privileged that forces, nature, whatever, have brought us together. And thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. And thank you so much for everything that you do through the podcast, through the coaching that you give, through the book that you've written and the books that you are yet to write, and your poetry. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Loved it.
You're welcome. And thank you all so much for joining Alison and I on this episode. Don't forget, we're on Instagram, and I love feedback, so email me at the usual place. Remember to subscribe, rate and review, and you can also click the share button in your player to send this episode on to someone you know who might get some help from what Alison has shared with us today. Have a great week, be good to each other, and I'll see you on the next one.